ready? Yeah? Got the thumbs up, we're off. Right. Hello, everybody. I'll take this opportunity because I'll forget it. We have got a meeting in April. We don't have council meetings, but this will be sitting in April to interrupt your campaigning. So, apologies for absence. Councillor Annette Wright, Joanne Marshall, Councillor Tim Pickstone, and Gillian Peat. Any other from the floor? No? Okay. Chair's announcements. Well, the only announcements are we're going to take item 7, then item 9. But just be conscious that on item 7 there may be some part B, no, item 9, there may be some part B questions around the financials, which are going to come in the back end. And Andrew and Richard will just monitor that, and if you're straying into part B, we'll hold those questions till the end of the meeting when we switch off the live feed.
And if we could just, sorry,
go on.
If we can just check when you get to the end of the part A item, if there are any part B issues, obviously Mr. Warren and co will stay, but if not,
fine.
No point holding them if they're not needed.
Yeah. Okay. Declarations of interest, we've had one. Anne works in the homeless field. Okay. Fire service from Peter. Any others? Okay, so we're good at that. Minutes of the last meeting, we've all had them. Can I have a proposer? Peter? Seconder? Don't rush. I'll do it. Put me down. There you go. I put Stella down. That's great. That's fine. Passed. Superb. And we were going to go to point 7, but we're going to wait for the Mayor, so we'll move to the work programme.
There's nothing to report on this, Chair. It's for information. Clearly wanting to accept any comments or suggestions on the programme for the April-May meetings.
So the only comment suggestions are, which when we've done the fire presentation, conscious that we've got a full meeting now, and fire are back in April and in May, that we might put a pack of questions together that we then bring back the answers. So it just depends how we go with the interaction on the presentations. As we get to May, if you know you're going to be, again, we will be having a May meeting, can I ask all members, if you've got colleagues that get appointed to these committees, can you remind them and work with them? Because it's likely that this committee will meet before a lot of the council meetings to officially ratify people's positions. But I am told if they've been nominated, it's going to be taken as read that they're going to be accepted at the council meeting. So we will need them on that 21st if you've got colleagues, and yourselves for that matter, on the 21st of May. I'm going to end up treading water now. Should we talk amongst ourselves? Let's see, have we got anything short we can take? Item 10, local transport plan, policy and budgets. That's information only. Fine. So we are going to start item 6, a bit all over the place, which is the homeless programmes and rough sleeping in Greater Manchester. And we may well adjourn it and then pick it back up once the Mayor has left, but he's not here and conscious, so I apologise. It isn't that it's not important. Apparently the Mayor's more important. So, over to Mike Wright for our homelessness strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be able to give an update to committee members on the progress of various homelessness programmes across Greater Manchester, and perhaps give a little bit more updated information on the nature of what those programmes are and perhaps how they fit together. I'll also be trying to weave in some of the latest data on the A Bed Every Night programme, which obviously we've adopted since the 1st of November. Just to give an introduction, we have 3 major programmes on homelessness, various aspects of homelessness, which are included in the paper. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
As no one has any questions,
So, having whetted everybody's appetite, we'll park that for the moment. So, we are going to go to item 7. Programme for Change, Outline Business Case. So we have got a presentation. It's a 300-page report that came out this week, really. So I think it would be good to get a good overview with the presentation. Jim, Andy, who's going to give the presentation?
Chair, I'll introduce and kick off with 1 or 2 slides, and then I'll hand over to Leon Parks, who'll talk through a bit more detail around some of the specifics in relation to stanza fire cover, and then draw it to a close just with some final comments. But I wasn't sure whether the Mayor wanted to set the scene in relation to this.
Not wishing to cut across the Chief Fire Officer, Chair, but I'm doing an event with BBC Manchester with an audience on homelessness, so I do have to be away, I think at the latest 6:30. And there's a couple of items, this and the opportunity pass, I think was
yes.
So it was just to alert the committee to that. So I'm keen to try and cover both items by 6:30 if that's okay.
As I thought, having jumping the agenda all over the place, is it the fire one? I suspect may run on, and once it has happened, if you're not here, that's probably not in the nicest possible way, not the end of the world. The opportunity pass, I imagine, because we did a lot of questions on budget, might be a short piece. So we could jump to the opportunity pass, totally cover that, and then go into the fire, if that suits. Happy to accommodate your 6:30 departure. It's your call, really.
Well, thanks, Chair. I think that does make sense, and I apologise for cutting across Jim, but I could perhaps say a few remarks as well on the fire issue. Deal with the opportunity pass, and then obviously Jim, Dawn, Leon here then to pick up the conversation with the committee after I've gone, because obviously there's plenty of detail that they know more about than I do. So shall I do that? Shall I talk to item 9? Take questions and then go into the fire discussion. I think that's
so
good.
We'll park 6, we'll park 7, we'll go to 9, and then we'll come back to 7, and then we'll go back to 6. So after.
Thank you for being so understanding, and thank you, colleagues, for the opportunity to lay out our thinking now on what we're calling the opportunity pass as a working title. We're in the process of asking the Youth Combined Authority to really help us build out this proposal. But I hope it's turning into quite an exciting development that could have a big impact on the lives of a lot of young people in Greater Manchester. I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but for me it really brings out what we're trying to do here. It was in Oldham, where I was in a school, could see the city centre, talking to kids about the opportunity pass. And my message to them was, look, I want you to feel that you can go there and you can work there and there's no barriers in front of you and you should feel confident about that. And the truth of the matter is that isn't how it feels to a lot of young people in Greater Manchester at the moment. They don't have that feeling that they can go everywhere, and they look at the city centre and probably feel quite intimidated by it. And this is what we're going to do. We've got to break down the barriers. And I think, since we first brought forward the proposal in more detail in early January, the whole debate about knife crime, actually, and young people and the challenges that they face. And I think this is particularly true of young people who are not on that university route. The offer for them is not good enough, in my view. I've long felt this. And the opportunity pass is an answer to that, because, as it says in its name, it isn't just about free bus travel. This is about connecting young people to study, to apprenticeship, to work, to culture, to sport, whatever. All of the opportunities that Greater Manchester has got to offer. It's about saying this is your passport to access all of that. Because at the moment, the truth of the matter would be, probably most of our boroughs, young people might not go to the college they really want to go to because they don't see how they could necessarily afford to go there, and they would go to one closer, or they wouldn't get the apprenticeship they really want because, again, they wouldn't know how they could get there and make it all work. And we've got to change that. But, and here comes this kind of, which is in the paper, here's the second, though, big reason. It is about doing the right thing by young people. However, we're on the cusp here now of beginning to sort of want to change the way the buses work in Greater Manchester. And one thing I am very clear about, we cannot carry on with the decline in bus patronage and at the same time turn the system around. Those two things don't go together. The more that people aren't using buses, the bigger our problem gets in trying to salvage a working bus system, because more routes are at risk. I mean, you get more routes cut and then the fares go up. We're in a vicious circle with the bus system at the moment, and you have to get people using the buses again. You have to stop this long-term trend in declining bus patronage. And the bottom line is, when it costs less for 3 or 4 young people to use an Uber than it does to catch a bus, you've got a big problem. TFGM figures show that 26% of 16 to 18-year-olds in Greater Manchester say that bus is their primary form of transport. In most other comparable cities, it would be the opposite. The majority of young people would say that the bus is how they get around. That would be true in London, I guess. So, you know, that's what we've got to do. And by getting more young people on the buses, we can help shore up bus routes at risk in the short term. So this proposal of the Opportunity Pass is important for all of those reasons. This report, Chair, kind of sets out the case for it in a very detailed way. It shows how we've engaged some professional support now. Rose Marley, who maybe somebody people know, who's CEO of Sharp Futures, is helping us now lead the project development on the Opportunity Pass. As I said, young people are very involved in it. What we're trying to do is, of course, minimise the cost to the public purse. So Rose has been given the specific mission of maximising potential commercial sponsorship of the Opportunity Pass. And we already believe that there are a number of high-profile sponsors who may well be interested in being involved. That's only indicative stage, Chair, but that's that's something that is being actively pursued. Alongside that, we have asked Rose and the team to work with our FE colleges, who've all agreed in principle to pay into a collective pot the money that they would have spent on passes. As the paper says, we want to do the same with sixth form colleges and school sixth form to maximise the funding we've got available for this purpose, so that we bring down the cost of the pass. The paper is really important in setting out the base financial case, the benefit cost ratio, and you'll see that it's got a positive result, where it's the benefits this pass will bring will outweigh the costs, which is obviously crucially important. The paper talks to figures that, the full cost of it being 15 million, if nothing else. Well, that is the projected cost based on the usage of such a pass in other cities. Now, of course, that's a projected cost. We don't know for certain. Our aim, of course, is to maximise revenue from those other sources, so that it obviously isn't then a straight call on the public sector. And it's why we've created this as a 2-year pilot, because there are so many unknowns in how many young people will use it, what the level of commercial sponsorship we can get, what's the contribution from the education sector. We're working with all of those unknowns at this stage. We will, of course, be maximising any funding we can get from other parts of the GM system to keep the cost as low as possible to the GM council taxpayer. However, I think it's really important for me to say that by doing this, we benefit everybody in terms of helping to start to turn around a failing bus system. So the paper sets out the figures in detail. Chair, I probably won't say any more on that at this point, other than open up to questions from colleagues before we then perhaps take on the fire issues.
Yvonne.
Just one or two things I'm not terribly clear about, first of all. It says somewhere that private buses organised by colleges wouldn't be included in the scheme. Does that mean independent schools, or does it mean that if, say, Stockport College organised a bus, that wouldn't be included? I'm just thinking of the conflict for students, deciding if they want a free journey on 3 buses or to use the one the college has already organised, which, you know, cuts across bus routes.
Well, I think Steve or Gareth will correct me if I'm wrong. It won't affect college-run buses. I think more remote colleges do that. Certainly I know my college where my own kids go, Winstanley College, they run a lot of buses because of their geographical location. The money that we would want to bring in would be more that the money colleges are using at the moment to purchase passes for young students on lower incomes. The money that colleges currently use to pay for those specific services, I think, would be we're saying would be unaffected, Gareth, aren't we?
It's exactly as Andy described, that some colleges, whether independent or public schools and colleges, provide private services, often where routes and areas aren't well served by the general bus network, the commercial bus network. What we've made very clear to the colleges and educational establishments is that we will not be asking for any of the funding used to provide those services, because they provide an essential service in terms of providing access to young people to get to those educational establishments. The money that we're talking to them about and bringing into the scheme is money which is used to buy commercial bus products, so products which are purchased for young people to travel on the bus network provided by Stagecoach, by First, by Arriva.
Just a comment, really, Chair. One of the last things that AGMA Scrutiny did was to organise a task and finish group on employment and training, which actually focused on the construction industry, in actual fact. But one of the main findings that came from that, from the various interviews with employers and training organisations and young people's organisations, was the issue regarding the cost of travel, the ability to move from Oldham to Manchester, as Andy suggested, in order to take up the opportunity of an apprenticeship linked to a further education training place, or possibly an apprenticeship in the employment in the construction sector, as it were, as that was the area we were looking at. So this proposal is, although very ambitious, is one that we can warmly welcome, and one that will help to enable many young people to benefit from the training and employment opportunities that will potentially be available to them. Thank you, Chair.
Stella?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've heard you before, Andy, talk about the importance of increasing the patronage on the buses and so forth, and this is one of the main drivers behind this scheme. I'm just a bit worried about apprenticeships, because obviously, as you say, educational establishments do have a budget for travel, even if they do means test it quite severely, or have to means test it quite severely. Apprentices don't really get much, and it's the cut-off point at 18. I realise that you've got to limit it in the first instance, but is there any anticipation that apprentices who are over 18 might be able to benefit from this scheme in the future?
I would certainly like to be able to do that, Stella, if we had the funding to do it. I think there is a scheme that TFGM run at the moment that provides a month's free travel for new apprentices to get them going. Whether we could build that out through this scheme, I think there is a case for an employer contribution to it, because some employers, I think, do help apprentices with travel costs, and our hope would be that we could ask them to pay some of that money that they would have paid just to go and buy a bus pass from a bus station, you know, whether or not we could then also divert that funding, that rather than just keep the money that they would have used to buy a pass, and then that might be able to extend the offer for people over the age of 18, if you like. So it's a conversation I think we need. It probably is one we're not going to crack before this thing is in, but I think it's one that we would want to continue to have with the Chamber, to see if we could capture more of that spend, really, so that we could then enhance the offer to all age apprentices, because the apprenticeship wage is is what? I think it's £3 something, isn't it? Which, you know, it's less than the price of a single bus ticket in Greater Manchester, you know, which isn't, you know, isn't therefore an option for some of them, is it? And certainly Wigan and Lee College told me once that they routinely see students turning down apprenticeships in Bolton and Bury because of travel costs, and hopefully we want to crack that problem with this.
Just another question. I notice it says that people would be expected to pay £10 for a card to start with. Will there be any exceptions to that based on parental income?
We're certainly not, excuse me, we're certainly not currently suggesting that there are, and the £10 charge is in line with what we charge, for example, for the cards like the IGO card, where again, that's certainly not currently means tested.
So I've just got one question. Oh, go on. After you.
Yeah, it's just also it says that it'll be offered to people on full-time courses. It's very hard to decide what a full-time course is sometimes in sixth form colleges because people do, you know, mixtures of qualifications, and what would count as a full-time course?
Well, I wonder why it said that, because you know, my aim is all 16 to 18-year-olds qualify. So I don't think there's a disqualification for young people on a part-time course, whatever a part-time course is, to pick up your point. Gareth? Yeah.
Can you point me in the specific direction of that? So the clause number within the report. Or just if you just drop me an email, I'll leave my details with you, because that will have to be changed. For the avoidance of any doubt, it is a universal scheme for all eligible 16 to 18-year-olds in Greater Manchester.
Conscious we need to move forward. I've got one question. With this, it's a pilot. I fully understand that. Fully support the concept. I think it's a great idea. What does success look like? And have we considered what failure might look like? Because if we run it for a year and then withdraw it, there's going to be a lot of disappointment. Has that been what those two? You know, is 20 million a failure? Is zero cost obviously is a success? Have we actually given that any thought?
We have, Chair. So what does success look like? It means a lot more young people using buses. It then hopefully means cars off the road. It means bus routes that might have been under threat, not under threat. It means young people having high ambitions for what they might do after school. It means to me people who haven't yet qualified for the card, 14 and 15-year-olds, thinking, oh, you know what, I might aim higher because I know I've got that, you know, I've got that card I could use to get to what I would want to. So success, I think, could be expressed in many different. The benefits that the BCR bring out could be quite varied. And yes, there may be a crime and antisocial behaviour benefit. The paper talks about agreeing rules where if young people misbehave and on public transport on a repeated basis, that the card is withdrawn. So it's you're almost developing a bit of a contract with young people. So success would be some or all of those things, really, a mixture of them. And yeah, when it comes to the finances, it would be getting down the extra call on the public purse as low as we possibly can. On your point about failure, well, there is a risk because obviously it is a pilot. But how can I put it? I think this risk is carried by me more than probably anybody, in that if it couldn't be continued because we couldn't agree with you all and the district's a way of funding it, we would have to withdraw it, and I would probably end up politically picking up the challenge of that. But all I can say to you is I'm determined to find a way of making it palatable to everybody in terms of the funding of it, because I personally believe the benefits, the societal benefits of this will be far-reaching. And actually, if you look at other cities around Europe, many are moving towards free public transport offers as they approach the issues around congestion, air quality. There's a whole drive, I think, towards highly subsidised or free public transport. And I personally believe we have to get into this kind of space if we are to deal with some of our congestion problems. And some of our air quality and pollution problems. So if that were to arise, and obviously we're going to have to come back again as part of the precept setting process next year, once we've learned from the first year of the Opportunity Pass what the implications are, that obviously will be the point at which we have a discussion with the districts about the affordability of it. But, you know, the paper shows we've got a lot of kind of slack, if you like, if I can put it that way, in the system. There's an underspend or a reserve in the concessionary scheme at the moment that is there to help, you know, protect the scheme as a buffer in the early stages. We're being offered money by the government for NEETs. So, for instance, that is funding that might go into this scheme. What we've got to do is kind of chip into the pot from all different angles, minimise the call on the council taxpayer, and at the end of that, I hope we've got then a viable scheme that's here for the long haul. And I hope colleagues on the committee can see that, you know, this is worth fighting for, I think, because it could mean quite a big difference to many young people in Greater Manchester. But the 2-year pilot is a genuine pilot, you know, and it's my job more than anybody's to work hard to, you know, to make it permanent and pick up all the benefits that Colin rightly pointed to.
Personally, we're asking our council taxpayers for a big chunk of cash on this, and all very laudable, all that. Absolutely, totally support it. No, nothing's measurable, and you know, is it? And that's the key, because if we go back, and as Yvonne says, we might want to extend it. We need some benchmark. I just think I would ask: could we do some benchmark? Could we get?
It's a fair challenge.
Get what is a success? It's great and lovely, but not specific enough for me.
So on that, it's worth saying that in the working papers which support this paper, there is a monitoring and evaluation plan which sets out the things that we will measure. There's also some further work ongoing to look at the sort of the desired social impact. So a really good sort of anecdotal example of that is that one measure of success could be that we want to maximise the number of bus journeys made. However, if that's to the detriment of short active travel trips, so young people cycling, walking, then obviously that's not a success that we would want to take forward. So it's a multifaceted sort of approach, and we need to balance all of the various criteria. In terms of benchmarking, we're going out through the colleges and sixth forms with a survey to strengthen the baseline, which is included here, because what you'll hopefully see through the paper is that whilst there's a lot of academic and literature that supports sort of a strategic case for this, there aren't that many people doing it, and there aren't any similar schemes. So the quantitative evidence is lacking. So in terms of establishing that benchmark and that baseline, we're going out with sort of gathering more information through the colleges, through speaking to young people, and then there is a monitoring and evaluation plan which balances all of those different things, which will...
I think to take up the Chair's suggestion, though, I think we should develop a clear set of benchmarks that, you know, I'll be happy to come back to this committee and answer to as the thing develops. I think we would, you know, we'll take that on board. I think chief amongst them, I would say, is more people on buses. Even though there might be a kind of thing where you're losing active travel journeys, the point being the call to reform buses in Greater Manchester is getting louder and louder. And I think the argument is, though it's a kind of a difficult one to make in some ways, I need to make, if we, as Greater Manchester, try and reform a declining system, we are making a big problem for ourselves, because, you know, we're not going to be able to do it, basically, because it's going to be a shrink. You have to start, the minute you've got the bus market growing again, it then opens up more possibilities to bring more money into the system, shore up, you know, stop it cutting routes, start building it back up again. And I think that kind of measure of numbers of people on buses is a key one. But you could look at NEETs, couldn't you? Numbers of NEETs in Greater Manchester. That would be another one. So we can develop a list, Chair, and I would be happy to come back to this committee and then be held to account by all of you for the extent to which the Opportunity Pass moves us in the right direction on a number of key indicators.
Great, because we're going to ask, I'm happy to ask our taxpayers for more money if it's working. If it's working, yeah. Simple as that. So on that, any more questions on travel? Conscious we might get 5 minutes on fire.
Well, I'll let Jim come in after if I've gone, if that's okay.
Please introduce.
If I may, just to set the scene before Jim and colleagues take over. I think the first kind of thing to acknowledge is this isn't easy for anybody, but we would say is necessary, because the fire service in Greater Manchester has not faced up to some of the challenges we would say that it's needed to for some time, and now needs to be put on a more sustainable footing for the future, recognising that we've had, as we all know, a very tough financial outlook now for a number of years, and that's affected the fire service like anything else. When I was elected, along with the deputy mayor, when I appointed her, we discovered that the GMFRS was managing some of those pressures by not recruiting firefighters, and we had a large number of vacancies at the front line, and clearly that wasn't a sustainable basis on which to work. We had what's called an IRMP, Integrated Risk Management Plan, that was making savings by removing pumps, and it had proposed to remove 6 pumps from across Greater Manchester, but without any evidence base to support where those pumps were going. And we picked up a lot of noise from the system about why certain places were losing pumps and others weren't, and we couldn't find an evidence base for the pump selection. So, you know, we came into a situation where the service was looking to make savings, but was not doing so, in our view, in a way that was evidence based, and that we then could be sure was providing the right level of fire cover to Greater Manchester. And then you play in, of course, to all of that, the whole question of the response to the Arena attack and the Kerslake report, which opened up a wider question around culture and leadership within Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. So all of those things came together and led to a very challenging process, which we've all been through. But having been through it, we're confident that what is being proposed, difficult as it is, does indeed kind of clear the decks a little and puts the service back on a proper footing for the future. To pick up a few of the bigger difficult issues, you'll see that it's about removing a number of pumps from across the system, and the IRMP was kind of right in the number, but wrong, we would say, in the location. So there are pumps being removed, but they're in, some are the same, but some are in different locations. There's a whole question of how many firefighters ride on pumps, and we're saying that there should be a minimum of 4, recognising that the aspiration of 5, which is, I think, the position of the FBU, is not something we've been able to do anyway in recent times. Currently, I think around 87% of our pumps are running with 4. And we've got to be honest, I think, with the public about the level of fire cover that we're able to provide. And this review, effectively, though that is an issue that colleagues will be raising, in effect simply confirms the position that we've been running, I think, for a couple of years now. It's not a new thing. Yeah, we've been doing that because of the issue about recruitment that I said before. There is a small number of station mergers which will release funding, but again, that's also about, in other ways, improving the service. You know, the estate is tired in some places and is not necessarily in the right location. So the 3 mergers that we're proposing in Bolton, Manchester and Stockport won't adversely affect response times, give or take a few seconds, but will create modern fire stations in those places. In the case of Stockport, we think it would actually improve response times to make the change that's suggested. Overall, the package maintains the fire cover for all communities in Greater Manchester, give or take a few seconds. We're currently responding on average 7 minutes and 7.5 minutes, and give or take a few seconds, we can maintain that. in some ways the most difficult part of this, because in some ways the station mergers that I've mentioned, they've been long talked about. The 6 pumps coming out, well, the IRMP was already trying to do that. The 4s and 5s issue, that has kind of happened anyway, and 62% of fire and rescue services in the country are already running at 4, so we're not doing something that nowhere else is doing. The issue that I found most difficult is the issue around support staff, because as the Chief Fire Officer will probably explain in a minute, the organisation has kind of grown in a way that where it has taken functions away from frontline firefighters, youth engagement, community safety, and has created new directorates to do those roles. And that, I think, is a bit of a hangover from the dispute of the last decade, when those issues were then handled in a different way. But it's created quite an unwieldy organisation where we have a situation that firefighters aren't doing things that in other parts of the country is a normal part of their role. But nobody likes to come along with a plan where it affects the jobs of people. The Programme for Change is talking about reducing the number of posts in the support system by 113. That, in terms of people occupying those posts, that's 88, because some of those posts aren't filled at the moment. It is absolutely my intention that there should be no compulsory redundancies. Can't give that as an absolute guarantee at the moment, because it's obviously complicated in terms of how many people want to take voluntary retirement or voluntary redundancy or early retirement. But what we're trying to do, as far as possible, working with Andrew Lightfoot, is work across the GM system so that we can also reallocate people to other roles here, or TFGM, or policing. So, you know, my intention is to work very hard to make sure that there are no compulsory redundancies as a part of this, because in other parts of the GM system we're recruiting, and it's a case of supporting people into those new opportunities. I'll probably finish there, Chair. I mean, as I say, given the pressure on the police precept, given the pressure on council tax and social care, you know, it is difficult in the current climate to say, well, there's necessarily a huge amount of extra money that we can produce for the fire service. I think it's also true to say that some of the money that has been given to the fire service in recent times, it hasn't spent particularly well, in that we have large numbers of non-operational vehicles, for instance, which is hard to defend, while we have some frontline facilities that aren't being properly maintained. The culture of the organisation hasn't been a frontline first culture, and that's what you will see on the headline there. I want to get this service back to thinking about maximising frontline support, properly looking after our staff. So we've moved to a new shift system as part of this. We were running a previous system where even on their days off, firefighters could have been brought in and asked to work in different stations. We were kind of squeezing every last drop out of them. We weren't being fair to them. And by moving to a more predictable shift system, we have, I think, done the right thing by our staff. We're talking about better kit, better equipment, better stations, but at the same time, all of that costs. And what we're saying is we've got to be honest with people about the numbers we can run on pumps, the number of pumps we can actually run overall, and the number of stations that we've got. The summary being that these things have been neglected, I would say, for some time, and we are finally facing up to things that probably should have been faced up to a few years ago. I think there's been some criticism that we haven't engaged staff. Well, the answer to that is myself and the Deputy Mayor spent an enormous part of our time last year visiting every single fire station in Greater Manchester. This hasn't been done for years, and we spent a long time engaging with frontline staff. We met support staff, we met people at every level of the organisation, as well as the more traditional communications with trade union colleagues. So, you know, it can't be argued that this was done without consulting people. We actually spent hours and hours and hours doing that last year. As I say, it's difficult, but it's necessary to put it on a stronger footing, and that probably is it from me, Chair. I don't know if anybody wanted to ask me anything before I go. I probably do have to go in a moment, but perhaps introduce Jim to pick up the baton, really, from where I've left off.
Any quick questions for the Mayor? You got flightly there. Over to the BBC.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, much appreciated.
Thanks all.
Jim, can you pick the baton up?
Thanks, Chair. I don't think I have to, actually. I think the Mayor's covered almost everything that we were going to say, so I'll leave it now. Thanks, Chair. I'm very conscious that in recent meetings we have talked with you about the programme for change, but most of it's been, for a variety of reasons, a verbal report, and I think it's the first time we've had an opportunity to sit down and give you a bit more meat on the bones, just as we're about to go out to public consultation on the whole outline business case. So I think that what the Mayor has done is he's set a very good context around where the organisation found itself, almost in a perfect storm, given what was happening within the organisation and how other activities were being perceived. So I think the point at which the organisation had reached, it was probably quite appropriate that the actions of the Mayor and Deputy Mayor in looking at root and branch of the organisation was both timely and appropriate. And I think what the outline business case, which is available soon to be read through in considerable detail, I hope, is a series of options and opportunities for the organisation. Probably the biggest change and reform programme that Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service has experienced in recent times. And from a personal point of view, I think it is a real opportunity for us to reshape the organisation, to pick up on a lot of the changes around how we deliver, the thinking around place-based working. And we'll try and tease out some of the detail as best we can in the short presentation. But I would also urge you to have a good look at the outline business case once it becomes available. It's a good read at 300 pages, so do enjoy it. I think just going on with some of the main headlines of the programme for change before we get into the detail, I think it's useful just to reflect on some of these. The Mayor also touched on the fact of the original integrated risk management plan, which was paused partly because of some concerns over the evidence base. And I think, as Liam will come on to talk to you about, we've tried to revisit the standards of fire cover and the whole approach to fire cover with a very strong evidence base around some of the options that we've not just included, but some of the options that we've discounted because of the evidence that has been factored into what we've been looking at. With the change in the whole organisational direction and the way that we do things, it was appropriate, I think, to refresh the vision and purpose of the organisation. And we did this by engaging with staff in the organisation and bearing in mind that we were trying to drive the core business of response and get back to the frontline first emphasis, which the Mayor quite rightly suggested we needed to do. Factored into that was a more refined approach and a more evidence-based approach to place-based delivery using place-based teams. Many of you will be aware of the work that goes on in fire stations working with our partner agencies, but this was an opportunity to revisit that and do it in a different, better risk-based approach. Underpinning a lot of what we want to do, and again, relating to some of what the Mayor has said, is that over the years, a number of protection, prevention and safe and well activities had probably moved away from where they originally were, which was on fire stations. We've identified that we want to get back to those roles being undertaken in the main by station-based personnel. And it's not that many years ago that fire service station-based personnel were actually undertaking these roles. So in some respects, we're going back to what we were doing. But built upon that, with the place-based approach, working with partner agencies, better information, and a much more targeted approach from the station base. And it's devolving that autonomy and power back down to the stations and local personnel with a more targeted approach, I think, has got to be the way that we deliver our prevention, protection and the safe and well initiatives. And the safe and well approach is going to be refined and changed slightly to have a more fire-specific and fire-related safety element, but working with other partner agencies to allow them to pick up some other areas which we will continue to identify with individual premises and place-based personnel. Obviously, as part of the combined authority, we have a range of support services which we can now start to join up and drive out economies of scale, working with the combined authority through our service level agreements. working with colleagues here and vice versa. We still have expertise that we can feed back in, and again, driving out some efficiencies both in terms of cash and non-cash. So there are real opportunities there for us to build on that. Coming out of the, not just the Kerslake report, was a desire and an emphasis on trying to work more closely with our Blue Light Service colleagues and the Greater Manchester Resilience Forum. So it's been something that we've been very keen to continue doing, and we have also responded, I think, in the short to medium term in bringing those relationships much closer together. The Mayor also touched on the need for transformational leadership. There were clear concerns about the organisation's leadership, and as a consequence of that, the culture that that leadership was creating within the organisation. And we've again committed to trying to change that culture and improve the ways that we work, the behaviours of how we do things, and also devolving, as I touched on earlier, a lot more autonomy and power back to where it should be, which is down in the stations, some of which had been taken away in recent times. And ultimately, all of what we're proposing, I believe, needs to be sustainable and efficient. We can't ignore the financial imperative around this, and we'll go into some detail about the financial projections that we have included within the programme for change. But certainly looking at some of the infrastructure and basic facilities that we've had, we've maybe missed some opportunities in recent years to put in sustainable and efficient solutions. I think that's something we've got to get back to very, very quickly if we are going to drive out the efficiencies and different ways of working, underpinned, I hope, with a new approach to our technology. So these are the main headlines around the programme for change. But I think it would be remiss of us not to say that we have already made some changes in the service. Certainly, even long before I got there, the change had actually started. And just some of the things that we've already done, the Mayor again has touched on, frontline first focus. We will continue to prioritise that, and that will come out again through the detail within the presentation and the outline business case, focusing back on what our core business is, core priorities down at station level. We've already commenced a recruitment programme, an accelerated programme in the last year, which we're now starting to slow down. We consistently lose about 80 to 90 people a year through retirement, natural reasons. We have to continue to recruit to make sure that we plug those gaps and we continue to get a diverse workforce, and we keep the age profile of the organisation on a balanced keel. Changes to shift systems were I referred to earlier, and the removal of roster reserves was a major issue for our crews, and I think the removal of them and getting back to a much more stabilised shift approach has been very well received and was quite rightly put in place as quickly as we possibly could. Another element which, again, is a reflection of the comments that were coming back from fire crews and fire personnel was the annual leave process, which wasn't particularly helpful in terms of family-friendly policies and procedures, but also I think what we've put in is something which gives more flexibility and a much better work-life balance for our firefighters, and again that has been very well received. Investment in buildings is something that we are doing in the short term, but I think again if we are able to move towards some merging of stations, we've got a real opportunity to put in place more efficient buildings that are much more suitable for the work that we're trying to do. But we will continue in the remaining building stock to bring that up to an acceptable standards. And one of the key things that was coming out from the feedback from station-based personnel, which the Mayor and Deputy Mayor and myself were quite shocked about, was the lack of full female facilities on fire stations. And that's something we've addressed in the short term as well to bring them up to an acceptable standard to where we are in 2019. And finally, the changes to the safe and well approach, which will take some time to work through, but certainly it's trying to target the safe and well approach more to a qualitative approach rather than a quantitative approach. At the moment, we're doing about 30 to 33,000 safe and well visits, but the targeting of them to those most at risk is where we have the challenge. What we want to get back to is, again, using the station-based approach with the place-based teams of targeting those people most at risk rather than just doing a quantitative number of inspections. And I think we'll get much more effective delivery of prevention doing it that way than perhaps just the 33,000 that we're doing at the moment, some of whom probably don't need to have a safe and well visit. I think these are the main headlines of where we find ourselves overall within the programme for change. And obviously the outline business case contains significant amount of detail which provides an evidence base for much of what I've touched on. One of the key things within the whole programme for change is the approach to our standards of fire covering operational risk. And I'll ask Leon Parks to come in and talk you through some of the detail around that and one of the biggest elements within the programme for change.
Thank you, Chief. Just a couple of slides really to put into context the approach to the fire cover review. I think the top bullet points already been referred to by both the Mayor and the Chief around the IRMP that was in place and the modelling that sat behind the efficiency plan within that IRMP. But the fire cover review was commissioned as part of the programme for change, and we were given a fantastic opportunity to do a thorough fire cover review within Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. Now, probably one of the first things that struck me was about the building stock and the location of our fire stations. And the majority, if not all, have been in their position for over 50 years. And the risk profile in Greater Manchester has clearly moved in that time. So it was a great opportunity for us to go right back to what I call a blank sheet of paper and look at our risk and look at our demand and remodel that. So the fire cover review itself was quite extensive. There was in excess of 30 work streams, significant projects that sat under that. And these included our approach to risk modelling, our response standards, appliances, fire appliances, station locations, and as the Mayor pointed out earlier, the number of firefighters that we place on each fire appliance. And there's just a selection of the work streams that we looked at. The fire cover review itself was completed in a relatively short timescale, given the significance and size of it. But I'm really confident in the evidence that was used for that review, which looked at 5 years worth of operational data, which looked backwards. But it was important to us when developing proposals that we looked forwards about the change in risk. So expansion of Manchester Airport, spatial framework, housing developments. We wanted to take all of that future risk into account in defining these proposals. Again, it's okay for me with an operational background to look at this review and come up with options and proposals, but it is quite easy to get blinkered. So it was important that we engage some external support. And what that support did for us was validate each work stream, and we tested our approach and methodology with the external validation. And that was really important for us to make sure that we were going down the right track. So we engaged 2 companies to assist us with that work. And both of the reports have they've given us an analysis of the final outputs, which reassuringly support our proposals. Just in terms of the package itself then, the first bullet point there refers to the removal of 6 fire engines at the above locations. Just going back to the changes in the shift system that have been made recently, which were made following the Mayor's visits. To make them changes in the shift system, we needed to change what's called the Ridership Factor, i.e. the number of firefighters on each shift, on each station. And to make these changes, we needed to put an additional 76 firefighters into the establishment at a cost of nearly £4 million. Well, we didn't have £4 million, we had the existing budget and the existing establishment. So with these changes being made, we've been able to supplement the number of firefighters using pre-arranged overtime for the last couple of months. That's not an everlasting pot, and that will come to an end. And when that comes to an end, we'll have the establishment that we'll have. So by implementing the changes to the shift system, which firefighters asked for, we will only have the establishment to crew 50 appliances. So that's where the 6 appliances on the first bullet points come to. So that's one of the overriding factors around that. The other proposal around crewing levels of 4, I'll cover that in a bit more detail in a further slide, if that's okay. One of the other proposals was to alter the start and finish times and the staffing numbers at our day crewed stations. These stations are crewed, so the staff are in the station at between 9 and 5, and then they go home, but they live within a certain circumference of the station within a couple of minutes. So they respond, they get a call from home, they respond to the station, and then they get on the fire engine and turn out. So we're proposing some changes to that system to increase the hours, to give us a better response, but also to look at the way they operate to make the system more flexible, and to have a look at how they're paid, because we believe there's an opportunity to consolidate their pay and make sure that that is fit for purpose. There is a further proposal to remove a further 2 fire appliances in year 2. This is in addition to the 6 that we've taken out on the first bullet point. And as has been mentioned before, there is a proposal to merge some stations. The 3 mergers mentioned are Bolton Central and Bolton North, and this is to have a new fire station in the midpoint between both stations. Manchester Central and Phillips Park, and this will mean a new fire station somewhere in the city centre, and Stockport and Whitehill. And the Stockport and Whitehill merger, the location where we're looking at, and these locations are identified through modelling and analysis, it will actually improve our performance to our areas of high risk. So that is something we really seek to do anyway. It just makes sense from an operational response perspective. If we put all of these things together, and this is the pumps that have been referred to, the changes at the day crewing stations and the mergers, the impact on the first fire engine attendance time is around 10 seconds. And we've done, the important factor for me in respect of riding fours is that when the first fire engine gets there, the second and the third fire engine. So all of the modelling, and there's in excess of 300 models been done as part of the review, has measured the first fire engine, second and third. The first fire engine, the impact is around 10 seconds. We're also proposing a new delivery model for prevention, protection and youth engagement and administration, and the Deputy Chief will cover that in a bit more detail. And you can see there, this would be a phased approach, and it would realise savings in year 1, 2 and 3. Clearly, building new fire stations, our aspiration is to do that within 3 years, but that's subject to identifying sites, planning applications, tendering contracts, and building fire stations themselves. The next slide just shows a proposed transition, and this just puts the figures into context. So the top line is the number of fire engines, and as you can see, from the 1st of April, potentially we move that down to 56 in response to the changes to the duty system. Year 2 in 2021, it goes down to 48. That's when the other 2 second pumps come out. And then the station mergers would release another pump. So we'd be going down to 47 fire engines, which is along the same lines as where the previous integrated risk management plan would have taken us. You can see there that as you move along the next line, it's crewing levels and the proposal to remove to 4s in 1920. Fire stations changed from 41 down to 38. That's because of the mergers. And you can see the firefighter reductions there from 1239 down to 1052. The proposals are to absorb the changes in firefighter establishments. And as the Chief alluded to before, we lose around 80 to 90 people each year through natural wastage, as we call it. So it's retirements and other things. So we believe we could quite easily absorb them firefighters into the system. And the support staff reductions that are proposed change from 423 to 310, and the Deputy will cover that one in more detail. As I mentioned before, the crewing levels of 4 is one of our proposals, and I just wanted to put this slide in really just to add some context to it. Within Greater Manchester, we work from a regional mobilisation centre. So when you dial 999, it goes to a Northwest Control, and Northwest Control identify the nearest, quickest fire engine to wherever you are. And that nearest, quickest fire engine is identified through a GPS system. So each fire engine has a tracker. They look on the system, it identifies automatically the quickest. It does not look at the number of firefighters on that fire engine. It doesn't, they don't know how many people are on the fire engine. So it will send that fire engine, and if it's got 4 on, then it's got 4 on. And as the Mayor alluded to before, for the last 2 years, we've had 4 on nearly all fire engines around 87% of the time. So we've already been moving along that line. 28 other fire and rescue services in England are already riding as a minimum of 4. The important point around riding 4s is a thing called task analysis. So we have a range of task analysis for incident scenarios, and I'll use a house fire scenario as an example. The analysis looks at the tasks that need to be done. So when you get an attendant to that incident, what tasks need to be done, i.e. the number of people you need to do them tasks. And for a house fire, it's 11 people. What we would do is send 3 fire engines with 4 on each, so you're actually getting 12 people. Them tasks, the 11 tasks that I referred to, they're not all immediate risk critical tasks. Some of them are done within 5 minutes, some of them are done within 10 minutes, and some of them need to be done immediately. So we've undertaken a big piece of work around validating our task analysis, and we run practical validations at our Bury Training Centre, which you'll be familiar with, to ensure that that provides a safe system of work, and we believe it does provide that safe system of work. I think I've covered everything on that slide there. So, yeah, I'll move over to the Deputy Chief for the prevention and protection.
Thank you very much. When I first came here and gave my very first presentation, it was actually around... Now maybe you can hear me. Yeah, my first presentation was very much around prevention and how important that is in order to actually reduce the demands upon the fire and rescue service. And I think it's just as important to say that the vision that we have for the future of Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service is still very much around response, prevention and protection. But we have to recognise that we cannot do it in the same way that we've been delivering it in the past. We just can't afford that model. And I think the Mayor did explain that actually within Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, what we had done was those aspects of a firefighter's role that in other fire and rescue services they already do, we had taken those and we created specialist teams to deliver prevention and protection and youth engagement. Now, you know, they've done a wonderful job and we do recognise the work that they've done. However, now that we are moving into the phase where we want to put the service on a sustainable financial footing, then we can no longer afford to do it in that manner. The work has to come back to firefighters. They need to get involved in youth work and make sure that the messages that we are delivering to young people are coming from themselves, where, as you recognise, firefighters have a lot of credibility with young people. So we intend to continue that work, but in a different manner. And that will mean that it'll be much more a targeted approach. So there will be fewer person-centred home safety checks, but they will be much more deliberately targeted through place-based teams. So rather than us, as the Fire and Rescue Service, going out and finding people to deliver to, through the place-based teams, we will be introduced to those more vulnerable people who will benefit from the work that we do. Unfortunately, this will mean that the staff that are currently doing that work will no longer be needed to do that particular work. And again, the Mayor has stressed that our ambition is that there should be no compulsory redundancies around this. If we move to a new way of delivering our services, it's only right and proper that we assess the support systems and the administration around these processes. So what we're intending to do is to look and where we can automate, where we can use the support services of the combined authority, we will. But what we need to do is to refine those systems, not just introduce IT for its own sake, but actually examine the systems that support the delivery, that prevention, protection and response services, and make sure that they are as effective as possible. So again, there is a need to assess the number of staff that are delivering and make sure that the work that they're doing is directly contributing to supporting that frontline delivery. The reason why we need to do that is in order that we can also reinvest back into the fire and rescue service itself. We've talked about the fact that we've reintroduced a new shift system and that we've changed the annual leave arrangements. But what we need to do is ensure that there is a replacement programme for appliances, for buildings, for equipment. We need to get Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service onto a sound financial footing. And that's one of the benefits from reallocating some of the resources and some of the savings is into reinvesting into the service itself. And then I'll pass on to the Chief to conclude.
Thanks, Chair. I think that is a relatively quick run through the main proposals within the programme for change. And I think what we've put together are options that reflect certainly the areas of concern that were highlighted by the Mayor and Deputy Mayor during their visits, and also reflects the concerns that were shared by station-based personnel during those visits, and has contributed to us focusing on the frontline first approach. And I think we've emphasised that both within the presentation and within the programme for change. It also picks up on the options that we're proposing, pick up on some of the outstanding recommendations from the Kerslake report, and proposes a series of options which still commits, I believe, us to providing a safe system of work that we touched on earlier for our people, and will continue to provide a service which continues to protect our community. It also seeks to deliver savings that are required by the required of the service, but given the financial envelope that we're facing. But equally, it gives us an opportunity to invest in areas where we identified gaps: appliances, equipment, uniform, training, and the stations, including the female facilities. It's certainly not an easy programme. If we'd wanted the easy option, I think we would have looked in other areas. But I think for me, and the Mayor did touch on this, that I think that if we look back at some of the changes that the organisation could have made in years gone past, we probably haven't taken those opportunities. And where we find ourselves is in a position where there are so many changes that we need to make now, but being compressed into a short period of time, which isn't ideal, but actually it's what the organisation needs, and we need to embrace what we're planning to do. The whole point of the consultation period clearly is to get views back from both internally from the representative bodies, the trade unions, our staff groups, and externally from the communities that we serve. And previous experience has suggested that we will receive quite a lot, and it's already started, which is encouraging. So we're urging all our people within the organisation to actively engage in the consultation, and we're certainly playing our part as a leadership team in going round and engaging with people, as we will do externally as and when required. So it's quite a watershed, I think, for where the organisation finds itself, and hopefully through and after the consultation period we will get a clear direction of travel for the proposals that we're putting in place. I certainly think it's a real opportunity for the organisation to reshape itself, and opportunities for people within the organisation as well. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take some questions.
Thank you. Thank you to the whole team there. Thank you for that. Questions from, right, I'll start with Yvonne and then go to Peter. You're not called Linda, are you? You're called Anne. Right, Yvonne.
I think I'm Yvonne, yeah. Okay. Well, generally speaking, I think everybody can understand where you're coming from and why you're doing what you're doing. I think it's a pity that some of the unions don't feel that they're particularly happy with it, but I think any union worth its salt would be challenging redundancies, to be frank. And that's just par for the course, and somehow you've got to find a way of making them feel a bit happier. As regards the recruitment, you're still recruiting, I gather, for front line firefighters. And how many are you expecting to recruit? Because you're cutting the actual end number, but how many are you going to be recruiting in the meantime?
At the moment, Chair, sorry, did you want the specifics here?
Just 3 courses of 36.
Yeah, there's 3 courses of 35, 36 planned for this year. But what we've got, we have some scope within those figures, depending if for any reason we suddenly drop to 60 people going out at the year end, we can fluctuate some of the recruitment numbers as we go through, but we'll be seeking to maintain the same numbers through the active recruitment. There was a gap of 5, I think it was about 5 years, where we didn't recruit, and that brings with it its own difficulties, which will manifest themselves in a few years' time. So we won't go, as far as I'm concerned, we won't be going back to that scenario. We will continue to recruit, but on a flex basis as necessary.
Supplementary or whatever.
Whitehall and Stockport are down to be merged, and I think one of the things is the way maybe stories are presented, communications, because the headline in our local paper was sort of shock horror, the closing our fire stations, whereas it could have been how wonderful we're having a brand new state-of-the-art fire station. And I think somehow we've got to fight that battle and get the positive side of it over, because as you probably are more aware than I am, some of the old stations are very old-fashioned and didn't have facilities for women, as you were saying. So it's good. It could be very good news, but I think the message needs to be stronger.
Sorry, Chair, yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. By coincidence, I spent 6 hours down at Stockport Fire Station last week just talking to a couple of the crews down there about some of the changes that we're proposing, and firefighters, being firefighters, recognised the opportunity that they could perhaps get a boat on the new station, because it would be relevant for the nature of some of the incidents that they apply to address. But I think overall, I think you're right. I think the positives sometimes can get lost in amongst programmes such as this, and certainly we will try and bring them out as best we can, even though perhaps some of the other elements will override that. But it's a fair point.
Peter, do you want to, if you've got more than one question, you can put them all together? It might just be just a suggestion.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to make a comment first of all, Chair. This is the body of work that is the full document, and there's nearly 500 pages, not 300. And I've had 10 days to look through it, and I have read through it mostly, and I have presented to the committee a review of some of the observations I find. But on the 1st of April 2019, Great Manchester Fire Service will be 45 years old. And if you look at the changes since '74, the number of motorways, our town centres, the shopping centres, Trafford Centre, Trafford Park, Salford Quays, the magnificent airport, the difference between now and '74, the asset value of what we've got in Greater Manchester is immense compared with what it was in 1974. We have reports from Eamon, Boylan, Richard, about the future. The Mayor has sold a vision for the future of this great city, this great area, which I buy into. I want to see it grow. But on the back of that, we're spending eye-watering sums of money trying to recruit, trying to attract investment, attract big companies. And on the back of that, we're saying we can't afford 9 fire engines in our city. Now, Merseyside Fire Brigade done the same, smaller brigade than us, they done the same exercise, dropping from 30 engines to 26. There was a huge public outcry. Tens of thousands of people signed petitions and challenged them. They now, this year, have reverted back to their 30. I think cutting the fire service, despite all the financial modelling, and, computers can tell you a lot of things, but I don't think the people will buy into this. And I think the eye-watering sums of money we're spending as a combined authority to grow and give this city a future, I think, the 12 million you're saving is a drop in the ocean. And I I support a lot of the thing, as I said in my report. Leon mentioned the growth for the future, the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, the growth that we've got coming for the future, and we're modelling for that. The biggest single project on the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework is Junction 19 of the M62, called the Northern Gateway. We're building over 1,000 homes, we're building a huge number of commercial premises, schools, and we're almost making another town. Junction 19 of the M62 is 500 yards from Haywood Fire Station, yet the future planning is to remove a pump from there on the 1st of April. So you're going to be left with one pump with 4 crew on board to develop for this area. And I can't believe, if it goes ahead to the extent that we're going to do, that, you know, one pump is going to be adequate for the risk that we're going to have around Haywood. So I have significant concerns about some of the proposals here, but equally I can back an awful lot of the proposals because it did need modernising. I do agree with upskilling of the firefighter's role. You know, there's some positives in here, but I'm afraid I can't sit personally and see the fire service being reduced in what we want to build our city. I think it's sending the wrong message out to businesses and investors who might want to come to Manchester to say, well, they can't afford a decent fire brigade. They're having to cut the fire stations, cut the firemen. I can see the merger of the fire stations as a positive thing. A new community hub, modern fire stations, modern facilities. I can go along with them, which naturally leads to some loss of fire appliances. But I don't go down the route of supporting, despite the computer modelling, the second removal of the second pumps from several areas. Thank you, Chair.
So just before we go into that, I'm conscious that we don't, at this meeting, we don't want to dive into the nitty-gritty. 1 or 2 fire engines at Haywood Station at this point. I think it needs answering, but I think we need to be feeding into the consultation. The services offered, they're actually back for the next 2 meetings with other topics. So we'll carry on with the questions, but I'm conscious that there might be some nitty-gritty questions that the service is quite happy to come back and tackle individually at a later meeting. Maybe Leon has got an answer because I've sort of had a nod, so there might be an answer. And if there is an answer off the cuff, let's take it. But be conscious that I'm very happy for you to work up a load of questions. We'll see if they're relevant to this committee, and if they are, the service is quite happy to take them and come back to us because there is a full consultation going on as well. So I'm not trying to preclude any question whatsoever, but the service is happy to deal with that.
Chair, I'm quite happy for the written report I submitted to go as part of the consultation, for the fire service to consider it and bring it back at another time. I just wanted to express my feeling, but I'm quite happy for that to take as part of the consultation.
That's great. So let's see what Leon's got at this moment.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a general comment, really. It's in respect to the review. I appreciate your points around computer modelling and things. But the important thing from an operational response perspective is the point from the call, the 999 call, to when the first intervention, fire crews first get on that scene, and that is really, really important to us, and that is what we've used as our baseline. We currently have the second best response standard in England. The aim throughout the whole review was to maintain that as best we can. All of this will change that by around 10 seconds. It's probably the best we're going to get with that reconfiguration. So it is really, really important to us. And as I said about the task analysis, the number of firefighters, we've modelled all of that. It just means we send additional pumps and we've measured when they are likely to get in attendance. Okay, thank you.
Lost track myself now. That was Peter. Anne.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's been really interesting. While some of it's structural, I think it's been very helpful that some of this is austerity driven as well. And I think it's very important that you've outlined that this evening, in that where some of those savings have got to come from. I think when you're doing any level of culture change, and like I said, I've followed on from a lot of what Peter says, it's really important that you take people with you. And I think it's quite hard for us to understand at this stage why the unions feel so uninvolved in the work that you've done to date. If it's all great and there's all these consultations going on, why do the unions, the FBU and Unison not feel that? So what's not working at this stage of going forward into the public consultation? I think without meaningful trade union engagement and them feeling that you may feel that's meaningful, if they don't, then I think it's going to be highly challenging for you going forward on that. again, as Peter said, that evidence is there. The moving to fours is against the FBU national stance. Again, I think that's highly challenging, and not, while it may be something that you feel is okay, it's against your main union's stance. I think that loss of pumps, and Mary may say more than this to me, the loss of pumps in Manchester, especially close to the city centre, and for us, close to Trafford Park, is something of another challenge and concern as well. So I think that's one point around why those unions feel uninvolved. And just the second point is, how will public consultation be handled? What are you asking of the public that you don't already know or have already decided? How is that consultation going to be meaningful? We don't want to be back here in 3 months or 6 months calling this in. And if we feel we need to call this in as a committee, we will not have a hesitation in doing that. Thank you.
Would you like to respond?
Yes. May I make a few comments around the work that's been ongoing with the trade unions. Obviously, we've been doing a lot of work around the modelling around risk and what the future service model might look like. And we've been having regular meetings with the trade unions as part of the trade union forum. I think the difficulty with that is that there's not always been a consistent attendance at those meetings. Although we have been able to give certain information about, well, we're working in this area, we're looking at those areas, what we haven't been able to do until obviously the proposal has been developed to this extent, has been able to work through with them those proposals. So at this stage, we're now at the point where we are weekly meeting with them so that we can chunk down the whole of these proposals and work through to get an understanding of their ideas, their perspectives. I think the frustration before that was, until you've actually got something as a starter for 10 to discuss, it's been quite difficult to have those meaningful conversations. And as I say, because there hasn't been that regular attendance, that hasn't made it as effective as it could have been.
Thank you, Dawn. Mary, I'm then going to go Mary, David, Colin.
Right. I am concerned about the loss of the second fire engines, 3, as I make it, within the city of Manchester. And also, I'm concerned that that means that the crewing level has gone down across the city, because you amalgamate the two, it means we have less firefighters in the city of Manchester than we have ever had. And I think that obviously presents a problem. And there has been no local discussion of this. So that leads me on to my second question, which is the place-based model. If you're going to adopt a place-based model, you need to provide me with a bit more information about that, how that will actually work, and what you mean by place. Do you mean the immediate area? Do you mean the local authority? Are you just using it as a way of where you will transfer staff to? And then the third area that I'm a little concerned about is that you don't seem in the presentation to have any real worked up proposals of the 3 station mergers and the new state of the art. I mean, I just took that from how you introduced it. We're going to find a place in central Manchester. That's not going to be easy, as I'm sure you know, because nearly all of our land is going towards residential, and it's very costly. If you want to do anything in Manchester Central, it's not going to be cheap. And I'm sure you know that, but it didn't come across at all that there was a properly worked out plan for how this was actually going to work. So need need more detail about that. And you're probably going to tell me that it's all buried in the, how many pages was it, Peter? 700? 565 pages. And if it is, then perhaps next time when you come back, you could point to those areas, because I think I commend this man for reading most of it. But there is no way that I've been able to read that amount of stuff. And we are supposed to scrutinise. And reading that amount of papers, you know, I've got papers to read all day, every day. And then this lot comes along and you're thinking, we should maybe have had a special meeting for this, something different. Because I don't think that we can scrutinise in the way that we ought to.
This is the first. We've got 3 consecutive meetings. This is the opening of it. I'll pass over to the Chief.
I'm sorry, Chair, but there's every likelihood, because you've chosen to do it now, that we are going to have a different committee by the time you get to the 3rd meeting.
I've already raised that, and it's 6 months behind I'll let the Chief handle that.
Thanks, Chair. I don't think we could necessarily pick and choose the time for the release of the business case. I think the Mayor and Deputy Mayor quite rightly had to be content that the proposals that were being put in front of them would stand up to scrutiny. They were comfortable with it, and that wasn't necessarily time dependent. It has come out now. I think what we've tried to do is to give a flavour of what, right at the start of the consultation, a sense and a flavour of what is within the OBC, given the high-level comments that we've made. Yes, there is a lot more within the outline business case, which I would encourage people to read, as I keep saying. But again, if there are specifics which you're already starting to raise, the whole point of flagging it up now is to use this consultation period for us to come back, fill some of those gaps, provide some greater clarity, or even dismantle some fears and hesitation that people might make. That's well within our gift and what we want to do. But it was appropriate, I think, that we get this on the agenda today to launch it with this particular group. The fact that the personnel may be different, we will have to cope with that as an organisation, and may have to go through things that we've already been through. But I think it was absolutely important and right that we got this to this committee tonight.
These changes are starting on the 1st of April this year, aren't they? No? Is it next year? When are they starting?
Yeah, the proposal around the first 6 pumps to come out should have been from the 1st of April, because that's where the establishment levels change because of the change in the duty system. What we're looking to do, because the consultation process, is try and carry that on as long as we can by use of pre-arranged overtime.
The anticipated start of implementation will be about the 1st of September this year.
That didn't come across at all from your presentation, I'm sorry. What I heard was 1st of April, but never mind.
That was that. I'm right in thinking that was the overtime pot that isn't infinite and will at some point run out. So that's we use it, which we authorised 12 months ago with the Mayor.
Just another comment, Chair, if I may, about the timescales. The financial imperative around this was originally based on the fact that we would start to deliver the savings from the 1st of April for the 3-year period as we set out there. Inevitably, because we are now just launching this as part into the consultation period, without us actually making any changes before the 1st of September, the amount of savings that we had originally planned to deliver will be slipping. So every month there is a backlog of savings that Richard would be expecting us to deliver as part of the whole GMCA. We have to deal with that in the short term, but the 1st of September at the moment is when we would start the implementation and therefore start to drive out some of the anticipated savings over the 3-year period.
I am conscious that it's a big body of work that we are going to have to do over the next, and it is tough in that, could you just have a show of hands, who is going to be here in May? Definitely. Obviously, we've got people, who is definitely going to be here in May? Are you not, are you?
The leader has it within his gift to appoint the Rochdale representative. I will still be an elected councillor.
Right. I asked that, and it's relevant because what I'm going to suggest is several people, perhaps, I won't call it a task and finish, but obviously there's no point in 15 people. A lot have got, I won't say no interest, but no experience of fire. But we've got a chunk of people that are interested and got experience that might want to submit a load of questions so the service can come back next meeting and possibly the meeting after to present those answers rather than trying to have the team think on the feet. We can actually have a proper explored, you know, we'll come back on the Haywood fire engine, I would hope, and we'll get, yeah, this is the model and this is how it works. But those people are going to need to know that, have a rough confidence that they're going to be here next season, should we call it. Mary, are you content you've had answers to your queries that you might not be happy with the answers, but you're content you've had answers? Is there anything you would like a bit more clarification on at this moment?
I mean, I am interested in the place-based model of working. I understand that they're not going to be able to give me full details on that today. I would like that, if it's in the big report, so that I can read and understand it, that's fine. But what I'd like is somebody to point me to that, because I don't know about anybody else, but scrolling through all these reports on this machine is something that my ancient eyes are not very good at. I have got cataracts arising, and the least time I spend looking at these screens, the better. I'm sorry to be an old person, but...
So on that topic, firstly, Jamie, could you arrange a printed set of that report specifically for Mary? But if anybody would like a printed set, please send an email to Jamie. They can be made available. How will we get them delivered? Have we got a mechanism for doing that? Right, we'll get them to either your council chambers or delivered in some manner. I'll leave that with Jamie. But I'll certainly get you a set. And if anybody wants a set, please email Jamie. And David.
Yeah, it's on the similar to the last two contributions, so I'll try and keep it relatively quick. It is important. I didn't know what the schedule was, and it is important that we get more time to look at this over the next couple of meetings. I mean, from my own point of view, I'll still be a councillor, but our May meeting comes a week after our council AGM, so who knows, you know, and so that's in the lap of the gods to a certain extent. But likewise, I'm very impressed that Peter went through it all, but then I know Peter's background, he would. I came back for a few days off at the weekend. I spent all of yesterday going through 112 pages, and then I realised that that wasn't it, and there was a link to 500 more pages, and I spent an hour this afternoon skim reading through the headings. So yeah, so you and just whenever I saw Salford or Eccles, then what's this? And that was about it. It will be important because we will get lobbied. 2 of the 9 in total that are being reduced are in Salford, and one of them's in my ward. So I don't know about other people, but I've already had an email from a trade union rep, which I got last night, so I've had to read that this morning as well. I don't know if everybody else got that. It's not the FBU, but again, saying that their concern is that they weren't engaged in the development. You say that you're talking to them now and there's engagement and consultation, but they wanted to be involved in the development and say that they thought that that was inadequate. I do realise that there's this tendency that trade unions will want everything to go through them. They regard themselves as the sole spokespeople for their members. On the other hand, management sometimes wants to go outside that and speak more broadly as they see it, but the trade unions see that in completely the opposite way as trying to bypass them. So, yeah, as we're looking at this, you know, I would want to be assured that there is proper engagement with the trade unions, because that's a very important thing to happen, particularly in something like the fire service and the unions there. So I think what I've said has already been answered to a certain extent, but I think those are very important things for us to look at over the next couple of meetings.
I'm going to take, that was David, I'm going to take Colin, and then I'm going to ask you to respond. I'm conscious we've got half an hour and still got a chunk. I don't want to rush this section, but we are going to come back to this next 2 meetings.
Thank you, Chair. All the points that I wanted to make, I think, have been touched upon, bar one, and that's to do with emergency situations. We're faced with a situation where we're trying to do more with less in effect, which lots of public services are endeavouring to do. But what's not clear to me from what you've said so far is what happens in disaster situations. For example, the Manchester Arena bomb, Saddleworth Moor, which were extensive, long-range, incidents that were spread over days, weeks, and required input from numerous fire services, not just Greater Manchester, but wide-ranging input from services all over the country. And now we're talking about a situation with doing much more with much less, if you like, at this point in time. And it's not clear from what you've said so far how we're going to be able to continue to be able to deal with a fire such as Saddleworth Moor, which hopefully doesn't occur again, but could do. Manchester Arena bomb, hopefully never occurs again, but who knows? Are we still going to be in a situation where we can continue to deal with those things and yet deal with the other smaller scale incidents, etc., that will occur from time to time across Greater Manchester? If we have 6 or possibly 8 fewer pumps, and the same thing may be happening elsewhere. Peter's touched upon Merseyside, and they've gone from 30 to 26 and back to 30, etc. Are we going to be faced with a similar kind of situation, possibly in the future, in the immediate future, in response to the consultation that is about to take place? So I think this is a worry, and I think it's something that the wider community will begin to touch upon as this consultation begins to develop. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's a really good point you raise, and part of the review that we've undertaken has looked at our planning assumptions. So we looked at all our major events over the last 10 years to understand what that meant in terms of resource demands. So we were able to update that, and our prediction is, because you can only predict these things, is that we could potentially have 2 simultaneous 10 fire engine incidents, major incidents, or a single 20 fire engine incident. That's our reasonable planning assumption. I think the Moorland incident is one that I would class as an unprecedented event, and given that unprecedented events do occur now and then with floods and the likes, we have well developed mutual aid arrangements. So we work on a regional basis on the first instance, so we can call for assistance and other services can call on Greater Manchester for assistance, but we can also use assets from further afield, and that's part of a national mutual aid agreement. The planning assumptions that we did and the work that we did told us effectively that we need to maintain a minimum of 42 fire engines in Greater Manchester. I'm not saying that we should drop to 42. If we get to 42, that's when we're really going to struggle if our planning assumptions come about. So a lot of that work has been done. It is really, really important, but some events we just can't predict, and we have to manage them as we go along. But rest reassured that we have got lots of arrangements for mutual aid in place.
Any more questions? That's probably loads, but so we've got Peter's submission. Has anybody got a specific interest and they would like to volunteer to read the 500 pages and then scrutinise it, or read 200 of the 500 pages and let's have 3 or 4 people? Don't all rush. Right, then it is incumbent upon us all to dive into it. if we could submit questions, if we're going to get proper answers to questions that have come out tonight, we're going to have to submit them. What will be the best route? Don't send them to me. Can we send them? Who can field those? Jamie. Yeah. Right. So we have any fire questions on the report on any of this? Fire it into Jamie. We'll collate them, give them to the service, and if they're in time, we'll get back next meeting. Go on. Yeah.
Sorry, one of my questions was just about the public consultation. I just think that wasn't answered, just because obviously that will not be 538 pages going out to every member of the public. So I just wonder if you could just touch on that, and that might be easier for people to feed into. Thanks.
I want to say I've kept very quiet tonight, and I've done it on purpose because I've had 20 years with the Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service as a councillor. But my concern as I leave, as I retire, and I take Mary's point, she's hit the nail on the head. I mean, you know, a lot of things have been said tonight I could answer, but I won't, because this is a new regime taking over. But I would like to, my biggest concern was the consultation. And the fact that elected members should have the opportunity throughout the region, the city region, to have their say on the consultation. And it's a very short period. I have assurance from the chief that that consultation will go around to the various boroughs. And it's up to our own councils then to try and, you know, get as many people and elected members. I mean, you could have a special meeting of your council, you could have a special meeting to discuss this, or it could be a public forum where elected members and the community are invited. But it's so important. I want to see the community consulted to the really vigorously to ensure that they, you know, that it's scrutinised in a proper manner. Thank you.
So, would you like to tackle the consultation question, please, which I think is both of those, really?
Thanks, Chair. I don't know whether Andrew might want to come in on this, but my understanding is that although I don't think the date has been set yet specifically for the formal launch of public consultation, but early indications are it will probably be next week, will be the commencement. The original proposal that was, I think, put forward in terms of consultation with the representative bodies and workforce was 6 weeks, but following representations fairly early on from the Fire Brigade Union, I think the Mayor has agreed that would be extended to 9 weeks. And I don't imagine that there'll be any difference between the timescales of the two programmes. I think that's about right, isn't it, Andrew, for the present time? But in terms of the actual formal launch of public, I think it is probably going to be early next week.
And Chair, what we can do to pick up Councillor Duffield's point is circulate the document that's been prepared to engage with the public, which is a summary of the 500 plus pages with a link to the full document, so not trying to hide that from the public, but it breaks it down and poses some questions, so that might help as a way into the detail.
Just also to add that I think that the offer has been made both, I think, in writing and verbally to leaders, chief execs of the councils, that if there is a desire or demand for us to go out and speak with them and present, we're more than content to do that, and that's almost a given, and we've committed to doing that as and when required. So I think the offer has been very open and comprehensive in terms of us doing that. So just to reinforce that offer.
Any final comments on that? No. Great. Could I grab 5 minutes at the end? Because I just want to go through how we're going to feedback and how we're going to fit that into the next couple of meetings. Yeah? So, I think we're back on. Section 6. You've been very, very patient. Very patient indeed. So, the fire service can wait, and we'll let the Mike in for the moment.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike.
And I'm grateful to everybody for holding on as well. Hopefully I'll be relatively quick, not least because I've actually got a flight this evening, so I'm straight to the airport as soon as we finish here. just picking up from where I left off, I guess some of the key points I'd want to make are around an increasing way of doing business around homelessness in Greater Manchester, which is a lot more closer cooperation between local authorities themselves, but also critically, I think, between partners, and the realisation that's embodied in the 3 main programmes that we're delivering, that actually no one bit of society can solve homelessness in the current wider policy climate, and actually everybody needs to come together to do that. There are also some bigger issues around realisation that homelessness and rough sleeping in particular are quite fluid things and don't fit neatly into local authority boundaries. And neither do people. What we're also seeing is a much greater fluidity in numbers of people who are at risk of rough sleeping in particular, and certainly homelessness at any one period of time. The report does focus a little on rough sleeping. Table 1 outlines the increase in rough sleeping since 2010. In Greater Manchester, that's 487%. It massively outperforms, so to speak, the national picture. But for the first time in November's count in 2018, we saw a reduction in Greater Manchester for the first time in 8 years of 10%. That's against a national reduction of 1.6%. On that particular night, where we counted 241 people across Greater Manchester, we also had 147 people in the A Bed Every Night winter provision. So that indicates the impact that provision has made. I just want to pick up a little bit on A Bed Every Night. As no doubt members will know, that programme was scheduled to run from the 1st of November to the 31st of March. That's now been extended to the 30th of April and likely to be extended further. Just some headline figures. Since the 1st of November, we've provided in Greater Manchester 16,973 bed nights in that programme, which is a staggering amount. We've actually had, since we've done some number crunching on the figures, 1,239 discrete individual people have been through A Bed Every Night provision in Greater Manchester. Some of the additional benefits, I think, of that programme is just worth making members aware of. 31 people have acquired bank accounts through their engagement with staff on the A Bed Every Night programme, which is a critical way of getting into more sustainable independent living. 41 people have accessed flu and hepatitis B jabs and screening. 60 people have secured identification, which has enabled them to find their own accommodation. And 65 people have registered with GP for healthcare, which is a critical issue for rough sleepers in particular, given the publicity around rough sleeping and homeless deaths. 87% of people coming through that programme have been male. 54% have been aged under 35, and what that's highlighting very clearly to us is that there is a cohort of young people significantly at risk of insecure housing and rough sleeping, primarily due to the impact of welfare reform on that client group, and that's quite a worry for us as we move forward. It does, however, chime with a couple of the recommendations that Dame Louise Casey made when she did an initial stock take of A Bed Every Night, one of which was to identify a better pathway for young people to take them out of having to go through A Bed Every Night into something more meaningful. The other focus that Dame Louise made was around on people with very, very complex needs and what we were aware of. Mental health is the single biggest support need that's been identified for people coming through A Bed Every Night, with 26% of people identifying as having a mental health need. Just to talk very briefly through the other programmes, and I guess the other theme I wanted just to bring out was how those programmes knit together to make more of a comprehensive, wider programme. So members will be aware of the Social Impact Bond, which is a programme for the most entrenched rough sleepers, people who've been sleeping rough in Greater Manchester over a period of 2 years. We've had 538 referrals into that programme. since December 2017, so the programme's just over a year and a quarter old. That programme has been delivered by Greater Manchester Homes Partnership, which is a partnership of Greater Manchester housing providers and support providers. We had a target over 3 years to get 200 people of that client group into accommodation. In year one, we've smashed that and have found accommodation for over 240 that is being sustained, and that is a real critical part of our programme, and also real evidence of the importance of housing providers being a major part of what we do. The Homelessness Prevention Trailblazer programme is, from my personal point of view, is something that I think we should talk a little more about. It's not specifically around rough sleeping, but actually is about prevention. It's about turning off the tap. 25,000 people approached Greater Manchester Housing Options, Statutory Housing Options Services in 2017-18, asking for assistance around homelessness. And actually, if we can reduce that number, there are considerable benefits to local authorities. Don't propose to go through all of the themes within the Trailblazer. It's quite a large programme. I'll just pick out a couple. One is around development of a social lettings agency approach, which is enabling use of good quality, more affordable, privately rented accommodation brought into the management of social housing providers and made available for people to prevent homelessness and also to prevent people from sliding into rough sleeping and getting into that statutory process, which is not always the best option for people. The other is around the development of the Homelessness Action Network, which is a forum which brings together the key players within local authority areas, voluntary sector, business sector, faith sector, local authority sector, and well-meaning individuals into a more coherent group to try and tackle the issues that we're all facing in a more consistent way. There's been some large meetings attended by well over 150 people every time. We meet once a quarter. And I just encourage, we're trying to make greater links with local authorities, statutory homelessness strategy groups. So I just encourage people to take part in that and encourage attendance and engagement in that. That's really shaping the way we want to do business across Greater Manchester over the next couple of years. Section 3.4 deals with the Housing First programme, which we've recently, members may be aware, commissioned or contracted Great Places Housing Group, or a consortium led by Great Places Housing Group, to deliver our Housing First programme. Housing First, you could have a session entirely on Housing First alone. It's a very well regarded national and international programme. There's some fantastic evidence, mainly from places like Finland, of the impact that that's had on massively reducing, in fact eliminating rough sleeping in those countries. This is a 3-year pilot funded through £8 million of government money, and we're expecting to accommodate and support 400 of the people with the most complex needs. It's not specifically around rough sleeping actually, but people with very, very complex needs over the next 3 years. Housing First, we will be very, very, very heavily evaluated. We're having an embedded external researcher from Heriot-Watt University appointed by the government to ensure that we stick to the strict guidelines of Housing First. We'll also be being compared against West Midlands Combined Authority and Liverpool City Region Combined Authority, who are the other two pilot areas nationally piloting Housing First. And I wouldn't underestimate the importance of the success of that programme in driving future government policy and the likelihood that they'll want to make significantly larger investments in Housing First. Scotland has just rolled out Housing First nationally. New Zealand has done the same. It's very likely, based on the evidence that we put together from our pilots, that England will move down that route too. So, just in conclusion, that's a very brief whistle-stop, Chair. Just in conclusion, the potential to touch significant numbers of people through these programmes and to shift the focus of what we want to do towards prevention rather than dealing with the most egregious examples of homelessness, which is rough sleeping, that we all see in our boroughs. But obviously there is a clear need to tackle that right now, because that's a very clear symptom of where we stand at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, before we take questions on that, we've got a minor issue in that I'd like to take questions on this. I've got item 8, which I would like to defer to the next meeting, which is the Leon's report, the quarterly performance report. We've got 2 other reports. I'm sure you'd love to come back with that. Can I get support from the committee to do that? Does anybody object? Great, superb. Okay, so you can stand down for the moment. And then we'll launch into questions on homelessness. Has anybody got any questions? Mary.
Yes, I mean, it's a report on homelessness, but it is target almost entirely on people who are rough sleeping. And the problem of homelessness, as I'm sure you know, is far more than that, far greater than that. I think that it tends to be, because it's visible on the streets, that people focus on that. But I worry a lot more about the families that are homeless, that we're having to put into all sorts of accommodation because we simply don't have enough places for them. And I worry even more about the causes of homelessness in the first place. And I'm very pleased to see your report, but it is just like the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's happening. And younger people, they are so targeted by the austerity agenda that's prevailed for the last few years. I know that's a political point, but I don't think we can really look at the whole issue of homelessness without understanding what has driven the whole thing. And also how it links in with the inability that there has been to control the private rented sector. So that brings me to a question finally. The private rented sector, you said, we're going to be providing, no, I think you said the social sector was then going to be taking over these private sector tenancies, so that people could be had. I didn't quite understand that.
Okay, yeah. Just to finish on just to start on that point, the principles around a social actors agency are effectively that social landlords will lease properties, take them out of the private rented market, and take over the management, the letting. Generally, there's some fairly well-established models that already exist in Greater Manchester where social housing providers will lease a property maybe for 5 years. Do that up, manage it effectively within the social rented sector, and manage the letting, the reletting and the housing management of that property. So that enables there to be a better link between local authorities and housing waiting lists than there would normally be within the PRS. Just to pick up your point around families, I think I should have started, Chair, I'm sorry, by saying the recommendations to the committee are to note the contents of the report, but also to take more regular updates around homelessness. I'm more than happy to do that and to focus on different things. Certainly, use of temporary accommodation in Greater Manchester again has outstripped nationally. So since 2010, increase in temporary accommodation of 347%. So on the 31st of March last year, we had 2,102 families or households, sorry, in statutory temporary accommodation. That doesn't take into account people without a statutory duty. That's the highest, certainly, in all the years I've been working in Greater Manchester. That's the highest I've ever known it to be.
Anne?
Can't not speak, really. Sorry about this. Thanks for that, Mike. There's 2 things, just for the benefit of the committee. I'm heavily involved in the social impact bond. It's without a doubt some of the hardest work that we've ever done, and the complexities that sit alongside that Mike's understood. Cannot underestimate the longevity that it takes to to assist somebody in their needs. I suppose one of the things that I'm really interested in around this, as you've touched on it a little bit, is around that sort of the impact of welfare reform or other government agendas. That what's the combined authority and the Mayor doing to address some of those, whether or not that's around Section 21 evictions, around right to buy, around welfare reform, that's having that fundamental impact on some of the work that we do.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, welfare reform, what we're finding is a barrier to preventing homelessness in that actually for people under 35 who are limited to single room rents, which is effectively 60 odd quid a week for most of Greater Manchester, there is no property that is affordable on their own. That's making it difficult to prevent homelessness, but also it's making it difficult to find housing options for people. Again, it's around the benefit cap, the bedroom tax as well, which isn't specific to under 35s. In terms of what we're trying to do about it, so Section 21 notices you also raise, which are no-fault evictions within the private rented sector. So there is some work going on at local authority level around trying to improve relations with landlords in particular, and actually provide assistance to landlords. We have a significant number of landlords, private landlords, who actually only own one property and are quite often fallen into landlordship, whether it's a relative who's died and actually certainly aren't professional, wouldn't profess to be professional, around improving standards. And actually the Ethical Lettings Agency is partly a response to that. We're saying to those landlords, we will take that over for you, we'll guarantee you a rent for that period of time, but let us do it. The other thing, I guess, is working a little bit more closely with DWP around the rollout of universal credit, and also busting some of the myths around universal credit, but also better targeting of things like discretionary housing payments, joining that up better with local welfare provision, so that actually the totality of the public estate, the public funding estate, is focused on prevention of homelessness, rather than simply keeping people slightly less poor than they otherwise would have been.
Anything else? Great, thank you for that. So we've deferred item 8. I don't think Opportunity Pass, we've got we're going to close the meeting, we've got potential Part B with the Opportunity Pass financials. Has anybody got any questions on that? I've not got any questions on that. I think we've pretty much covered it, which is great. So we don't need to exclude anybody. So next meeting, 16th of April, usual place. Obviously, very important on the fire front, without a doubt. And on that, thank you, everybody. Can I have 2 minutes with you at the end? That's great. Thank you.